Hello again, and today I want to talk about race plan, event plan, pacing plan, and how important it is. It's really important to have some sort of plan of how you're going to ride your event as soon as possible. So once you've entered an event, have a look at the route and get some idea of how you're going to ride it. So a good way to ride events, if they're hilly particularly, is to ride the hills a bit harder. The descents are easier, and the flat bits are at a sort of medium intensity, and that's more aerodynamically efficient. Obviously, if you're in a road race or an event where it's a group race, your pace is going to be dictated by the group that you're in, and as a consequence you're going to have to adjust your strategy accordingly, and that should come into your race pace event plan. And the reason you should get a plan early on is it's a lot more than a plan for how you're going to ride the event. It's a basis for your training plans, it's a measure to work towards. So if you've got a strategy, you need to test yourself as to whether you can execute that strategy effectively, and if you can't, then you can identify your strengths and weaknesses against your event plan, and in that way you'll maximise your potential for the event. And this is whether it's a competitive event or you're just aiming to do a best time for the event, or get into finish within a certain time. It might be that it's, for instance, a long ultra endurance event, you might want to finish before the finishes party or the cut off at various control points. It's a basis for practice rides. So if it is like a long ultra endurance type event, you can find some practice rides where you have to navigate, if you have to navigate on the course, and with the appropriate terrain, and practice that all your kit works, your nutrition strategy and everything else works. Obviously, when you first make the plan, unless you've done the event before, you're likely to not get it right. So the sooner you make a plan, the sooner you can start testing against that plan and make adjustments to improve the plan, so that when you get to race day or event day, you're in the best possible shape to do the best possible performance. And of course, if the equipment setup, so there are many factors in equipment. If it is an ultra endurance event, you will have to carry some kit. If it's a mountain bike marathon, you'll have to carry some equipment. And if it's a particularly hilly event, you'll want to make sure that your gearing's appropriate for the event, and bearing in mind that you might be quite tired, so you need to make sure your gearing's appropriate for climbing hills when you're tired, for instance. Irrespective of whether the event's in 2 weeks' time or 2 years' time or 4 years' time, as would be like a Paralympic or Olympic cycle, which I sometimes work towards. If it's a long-term event, an event in the future, several weeks, months or years in advance, then you can plan training blocks to work against your strengths and weaknesses according to your plan. If it's just in the near future, you can improve your skill levels quite effectively. It might be that if you want to ride your first criterium or a first mountain bike off-road event, you can practice some skills. You'd want to practice cornering, accelerating out of corners, for instance, or a mountain bike event, you might want to practice improving your efficiency on technical climbs, if it's going to have technical climbs, descending, etc. So how might you deal with these respective events? We just mentioned, for instance, a criterium and improving your skills, but in terms of improving your fitness, so if it was a long flat event, like I recently coached somebody who did the race around the Netherlands, and she spent a lot of time practicing sitting on tri-bars, aero bars, at a tempo pace, because it was a very long event, obviously race around the Netherlands, on flat terrain. And when it was windy, she practiced riding into the wind, and with the wind, and with crosswinds, so that she improved her ability to ride on flat ground for sustained periods with as efficiently as possible. If you're into a hilly event, like a Gran Fondo or a hilly road race or a mountain time trial, or something like the Trans-Pyrenees, the TPR, then you need to practice hills, and how you do that needs to be worked into your strategy. So if it's particularly long hills and you don't live in a hilly area, you need to think about how to deal with that and train yourself to be able to ride at the appropriate intensity on the climbs that you're going to encounter, and work out what the longest climb might be and the average climb, and just keep practicing that. If it's a short, steady event, like if you're training to do your local 10-mile time trial, then you could then you need to be as aerodynamic as possible, and comfort levels don't matter too much, and you can pretty clearly work out your intensity is going to be a little bit above your anaerobic threshold or your functional threshold power. If it's fairly flat, then you're just training yourself to work for 20 or 30 minutes at an intensity a little bit above your functional threshold power. So you adopt a fairly traditional training plan of doing some endurance aerobic training, some threshold work, and probably some maximal aerobic around about your VO2 max power. If it's a variable intensity event like cyclocross, mountain bike cross country, then criteriums as we mentioned, and road racing, then you need to be able to accelerate, recover, sit in a bunch. So you need to improve your technical skills, and you need to have some really high-end powers and think about that variability. So as you can see, you need to have a plan for your event and understand your event, and also understand the terrain of the event, the course, whether it's hilly, flat, rough ground, technical terrain, whether you're going to have to accelerate, recover, or ride at a steady pace. And having this race plan at the outset allows you to set your training plan to improve the relevant areas of your fitness. When you get closer to your event, or right as you go through this process, as you move towards your event, you'll be improving your race plan, your event plan, and your pacing plan, such that you've got everything dialed in and you know what you're going to do. Obviously it needs to be flexible because things don't always go to plan, but having a plan is good, and knowing where your limits are. And last week we had a regular Zoom meeting with the training group that I suppose partly because of lockdown, and partly because most of my athletes are scattered around the world. The athlete I mentioned earlier that I coached who ran the wet race around the Netherlands, she was talking about her race plan, and she knew that she had to stay in zone 2, her training zone 2, and she rode with a power meter. And she was very tempted, because she knew towards the end she was in with a chance of winning the event, to go a little bit harder, but she was disciplined and she stuck with her plan. And in fact, because in training she'd been a little bit above this zone 2 power, and found that she'd struggled and had taken a long time to recover, she stuck with her race plan and she won the event. So having a plan, knowing your limits, sticking with the plan during the event is also fundamental to success. So in summary, you need to plan early, look at the route, look at the type of terrain you're going to have to ride over, think about how you're going to execute this race, whether it's a race in 2 weeks' time or 2 years' time. Make a plan accordingly, a training plan, and look at your equipment. Train according to the plan, test yourself against the race, the final event plan, and see how you perform, and refine that plan as you get fitter and stronger. You may find that that certain criteria are going to work better for you than you originally thought, or certain things you might struggle with that you thought you would be quite good at. Make the plan as good as you can be for when you start the event, and then use the plan sensibly during the event, and know your limits and stick with those limits. And that's it really. If you do that, then you're likely to be successful. So good luck, and hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe if you want to see more, and click the bell to get a reminder. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.